Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. I love a good story twist. One that plays fair, but you don't see coming. When a twist is done well, it pays off something in terms of plot or character development and changes the way you've looked at the story. Now, I would argue that one of the best that stands the test of time has to be the end of Watchmen. But second best is what I want to talk about today, a book from Marvel in the late 90s called Thunderbolts. I think that this is the book that really helped cement the creators, Kurt Busiek as writer, Mark Bagley as artist, as superstars. I'm going to talk today about this book, but keep in mind I will be spoiling a book from 1997 to some degree. I'm going to talk about the history of Marvel that writer Kurt Busiek uses to his advantage and how he used it to add depth to some villains. But before I go too far, a word from our sponsor. Folks, I'm happy to tell you that this video is sponsored by Star Trek Fleet Command. Now, today on the show, we're talking about villains. Well, in the world of Star Trek, there's no enemy bigger than the Borg, right? Well, in Star Trek Fleet Command, the Borg are back. And you can get this game for free on iOS, on Android, on Windows. The link to that is in the description below, or you can use this QR code. Star Trek Fleet Command is a free-to-play open-world MMO game in which you command a starbase on the front lines of the Star Trek universe, construct fleets of your favorite ships, recruit legendary officers to crew them, and pursue your goals of expanding territory, exterminating rivals, exploiting resources, and exploring strange new worlds. The Borg are back in new missions inspired by their iconic appearances in Star Trek The Next Generation. You can join fan favorite Hugh the Borg and help him stop a scientist's quest for revenge against the Collective. You can save an eager Pakled from himself as he tries to get the Borg to assimilate him on purpose. And you can prevent the Borg from assimilating the technology behind your AI assistant, Maya. Also, a new feature to Star Trek Fleet Command are Fleet Commanders, allowing players to assign well-known Star Trek heroes and villains to oversee strategy from their star bases for increased power and effectiveness in the game. Fleet Commanders launches with 3 choices: Admiral James T. Kirk, Captain Spock, or Locutus of Borg. Build the command center, a new starbase location from which to manage your fleet commanders. Again, thank you so much to Star Trek Fleet Command. The link is in the description below, or the QR code. And without any further ado, let's talk about Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts debuted on store shelves just as 1997 began and showed us a destroyed New York. Marvel had just had an event where many of their main heroes, including the Avengers and Fantastic Four, had seemingly died fighting the villain Onslaught. This left a vacuum that a news reporter mentions, showing villains that are on the loose. We witness a team of professional thieves looting the city, only to be stopped by the debut of a new group of superheroes, calling themselves the Thunderbolts. Soon, they hold a press conference explaining that they're trying to step up to fill the gap left by the world's premier superheroes. The team is led by Citizen V and features the engineer Techno, the powerful Moonstone, the growing strongman Atlas, the high-flying Mach 1, and Songbird, who can produce hard light constructs. Early issues show the characters nervous about stepping up on such a big stage, and also establish numerous interpersonal relationships such as Moonstone spying and scheming, and Mach 1 and Songbird's budding romance. The issue's climax features them battling the supervillains known as the Wrecking Crew, triumphing and hearing the cheers of the public. But the issue ends on the big twist. Citizen V walks past his team without his mask, revealing a badly scarred face. And he explains that he is actually the famous supervillain Baron Zemo, and that the team he has assembled are all former members of his supervillain team, the Masters of Evil. The supposed superheroes are actually famous supervillains Fixer, Beetle, Screaming Mimi, Goliath, and Moonstone. They are taking advantage of the missing heroes to pose as new heroes to gain the public and government's trust in a long-term plot. In retrospect, this twist was foreshadowed at least twice in this issue. The news crew prominently mentions the Masters of Evil, who hadn't been used as a team for 9 years, last appearing in the Avengers Under Siege arc of Avengers in 1986 by Roger Stern and John Buscema. And when the Thunderbolts are about to battle the Wrecking Crew, Techno briefly objects, because the Wrecking Crew used to be their teammates in the Masters of Evil. This issue was and remains a blast. It's got action, it's got the melodrama of all sorts of interpersonal relationships that works really well in superhero comics, and I just remember that twist legit surprised me. The idea that these characters weren't new, they were actually well-established villains, was a twist that I did not see coming, and I remember instantly going back and rereading the whole issue. So, let's break down what works and why it works so well. The first thing we have to give everyone credit for is that this was kept a secret. Marvel solicited Thunderbolts but gave no indication that there was a twist, and no one spilled in any interviews. I asked writer Kurt Busiek on Twitter if he had to take any special measures, and he explained Marvel was very careful to make sure everyone at the company knew not to talk about it in interviews until the book was published. Marvel had the Thunderbolts appear as a superhero team twice just before their series debuted. Once as guest stars in The Hulk, and once in some early pages in Tales of the Marvel Universe, which highlighted some upcoming books. In issue 72 of the comics industry publication Wizard, Kurt Busiek explained how he came up with the idea, saying, quote, "The actual origin of the Thunderbolts came when I used to live in New Jersey and drove to New England to visit my parents. To keep myself awake, I'd give myself books to write and work out about 2 or 3 years of continuity. One trip, I assigned myself Avengers and came up with the plan that the Masters of Evil would ultimately conquer them by posing as new heroes and slowly replacing them. At the time, I thought it was a neat idea and filed it away." Busiek went on to explain that while it would be an interesting twist for a single character, and he cites how Wolfman and Perez did it effectively with Terra on their new Teen Titans run, the readers would probably not care for the entire team of the Avengers being replaced. But then, something changed. Marvel filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in December of 1996 and was ready to try some bold new ideas. One of those was to hand over the titles Captain America and Avengers to Image co-founder Rob Liefeld, and Iron Man and Fantastic Four to Image co-founder Jim Lee. Marvel's event Onslaught featured the characters being removed from their main continuity, and the popular creators rebooted these ideas under the Heroes Reborn banner. With the Avengers gone, Busiek realized he could revive his idea under a new team name. It was a clever use of the history Marvel had to work with. Each of the Thunderbolts characters was an established villain, but that's all we knew them as. This title allowed us to know who they were as people and see how they'd react in a new situation. The Masters of Evil had a huge victory in the Avengers Under Siege arc. They destroyed Avengers Mansion, put Hercules in a coma, broke Jarvis the Butler's legs, and Zemo destroyed Captain America's only surviving photo of his mother, among other cruelties. These were all capable enemies, but how would they react to pretending to be heroes? I've always believed that if you pretend to do something, in some situations, that can be the same as actually doing it. For instance, if you were afraid of public speaking, but you faked it, well, to everybody else, you would appear confident. You would appear to be a good public speaker. And as the Thunderbolts pretend to be heroes, they kind of get used to it, and some of them start to like it. It changes their dynamics. And that's where Thunderbolts truly excels. It isn't a twist that goes nowhere. Instead, it became the launching point for a variety of stories. By issue 4, the Thunderbolts gain a new member, Jolt, who believes that they are heroes and is absolutely not a former villain. Now the team has to hide who they are from a teammate, that many of them grow to care about. The Avengers and Fantastic Four return to the main Marvel Universe 1 year later, and the title worked that in. In issue 10, the government team S.H.I.E.L.D. tries to apprehend the Thunderbolts at a press conference. The Thunderbolts are now on the run and reconvene only for Baron Zemo to explain that he leaked their identities. It's stage 2 of his plan because he noticed that members Mach 1, Songbird, and Atlas were all starting to enjoy being heroes. By outing them, they now have no choice but to stay loyal to him. That story culminates in the team splitting in half as some of them now want to be heroes. They drive Zemo and Techno away, but are unsure of their next step. That's when Avenger Hawkeye steps in. As a reformed villain, he believes in the team and offers to lead them if Mach 1 will turn himself over to the police, since the Beetle was the only member to actually have killed someone in the past. Without recounting every story beat, it meant that the Thunderbolts continued to change both its roster and its team dynamics. It never became stagnant. Neither Busiek nor Mark Bagley broke in with the Thunderbolts. They'd worked on important books like Justice League of America and Amazing Spider-Man. Busiek started to turn heads with his run on Untold Tales of Spider-Man, which allowed him to successfully pitch Thunderbolts. And from there, he started working on top-tier titles like Avengers shortly after. And Bagley had actually been the artist when Spider-Man had its highest ever circulation. He's basically been able to choose his own projects ever since. The Thunderbolts idea felt new. It felt like Busiek and Bagley owned it. This Thunderbolts run, in my opinion, allows Busiek to do something he's good at. He uses comic book history to build out a believable world, but does not get bogged down in continuity that would distract new readers. He writes characters that feel unique from one another. Zemo is an angry but patient schemer. Moonstone can be more impulsive, but they're both clearly more educated than, say, Atlas or Mockingbird. Atlas had a sister he loved very much. Zemo is consumed with becoming a person his father would have admired. Songbird took the path of least resistance in life and made some bad choices, but at her core, she has a lot of love for people. Meanwhile, Bagley can draw engaging and explosive superhero action that gives the reader a clean and exciting reading experience. He's got his style all over it, but Jolt looks like a young person. Mach 1 isn't as buff as Atlas. They look unique. I think a reason Bagley keeps coming back to Spider-Man is he's really good at a lot of the important aspects of Spider-Man. A gymnastic life character. You can see that plenty in Thunderbolts. He's good at urban environments. He's good at composing interesting shots that emphasize the scale and scope of over-the-top action. But he's also good at drawing women with doe-eyed innocence that heightens the soap opera drama that seems to work so well with superhero stories. The Thunderbolts is an example of a trope in comics, taking a bunch of existing characters and mashing them together into a team. Sometimes it works great, like Justice League and Avengers, or more recently, Guardians of the Galaxy. And other times, it's completely forgettable. How many of you remember Ghost Rider and Hercules on The Champions? Why does it work here if it doesn't always work? I'd argue that the group titles that work give the reader something more than mashing up existing characters. For instance, DC's Suicide Squad puts together villains, but they're working off prison sentences by taking dangerous missions. The Guardians of the Galaxy are somewhat broken people looking for redemption and purpose in life. With the Thunderbolts, we start with something fairly straightforward. Villains scheming to gain trust. But then we see that many of them are starting to like helping others and being respected. These are the characters that remain at the center of Thunderbolts through its iterations. Busiek and Bagley worked on the title for about 3 years through issue 33. I think the run is incredibly consistent. Action, betrayals, changes of heart, and never really keeping a status quo for too long during that run. It really is impressive how this book gives you that twist right off the bat and just grabs you with its premise. They could have held that back till issue 6 or something like that, but no. They grab you right away. And as soon as you see this premise of villains posing as heroes, you know that at some point it has to fall apart. But the question is, how? How will it fall apart? What will the ramifications of it falling apart be? And so the book uses that as the jumping off point to go in a lot of interesting directions, really play with character dynamics. Now, of course, the Thunderbolts did continue after Busiek and Bagley's run. I was talking about their run because I love their run. After that, I would argue most of the iterations, not to say that any of them are bad or anything like that, but you've already done the twist. So it's sort of Thunderbolts in name only. The original story was a premise of villains on potentially a redemption arc. After that, other iterations of Thunderbolts do use villains, but most of the time they're working for the government. They might be on, an arc of redemption, but it's not necessarily a big twist or anything like that. There's no secret to get exposed or for a plot to fall apart. And I would argue that villains working for the government is just too similar to DC's Suicide Squad, which got there first. But that initial run through issue 33 by Bagley and Busiek, that's something special. Folks, thank you so much for being with me and watching this episode. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you also to this week's sponsor, Star Trek Fleet Command. Sincerely appreciate that. I do strongly recommend this book. I remember it being a blast at a time when there was a lot of books in the mid to late 90s that were very gimmicky. There was a lot of, gimmicks. It wasn't great. I'm just riffing right now, by the way. But there's always going to be gems in any era. You just need to know when to look. And Thunderbolts, I would say, is a very, very good book. If you like superhero stuff at all, try this out. It's doing something different, and it's great. I remember really, really coming to care about Mach 1 and Songbird in particular, and their romance. I'd be curious to check in on them again at some point, Marvel. Let's see where we can go with that. Songbird was especially great. She was really positioned to go from sort of a shy, passive character that had gone in the wrong direction to going like, no, she's pretty powerful and special. If she can get over her insecurities, she can become a really great hero. It also built up Zemo as an actual big threat. He debuted as a character that was calling himself the Phoenix, even though he was the son of the original Baron Zemo. But this really, really helped cement him as a top-tier villain, as somebody memorable. A lot of great stuff to look at in this book. Some of the issues towards the end I remember were fill-in, but also by a great artist, Patrick Zurcher. So, good art all the way through. I recommend it. I'm rambling. I'm going to let you go. I'll be back next week with another exciting episode. Until then, my mission for you, keep reading comics. Remember to hit like and subscribe. Bye. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please consider hitting like and subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, there are merchandise links beneath the YouTube video, and you can always hit join on YouTube or visit Comic Tropes on Patreon to get access to special perks. A little better and in a different way. What am I saying? And Zemo destroyed Captain America's only surviving photo as... I stuttered. Darn it. He's really good at the important aspects of... I stuttered again. And that's great. I want to say thank you again to this week's sponsor, Starfleet. Well, I effed that up at the end. The original run... I don't like how I'm pausing there. Okay, wow. One more take.